Chai with Manjula, a show about giving, featuring non-profit organizations, social activists, social entrepreneurs, and philanthropists who are giving back and making a difference.
Chai with Manjula is a show that is a must-see.
Welcome to Chai with Manjula. Our guest today is Dr. Jyothi Bathina, a professor at Cal State Fresno in the literacy department. But her real passion is working with at-risk children. She is the founder and director of the Literate Voices project, which seeks to encourage and motivate young people who are impoverished and silent. By working with and publishing the heart-wrenching stories of these youth, she hopes to inspire them to have dreams and help readers understand and address the issue of terrible inequities in our society. Jyothi, welcome to Chai with Manjula.
Thanks, Manjula. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, this is a great project and a wonderful idea of publishing stories of at-risk children in their own words and in the process transforming their lives. So tell us about the concept and also how did you even come up with this idea?
Well, it's actually interesting, Manjula. It wasn't something that I had planned. I had always wanted to be a professor of English. Since childhood, I wanted to be a professor, and I managed to do it. But reality set in when I actually finished the PhD and found that there were no jobs available. So there were 400 applicants for every position. And I love teaching, so I wasn't about to give up that dream. So I said, okay, until I become a professor, let me at least teach high school. So I ended up teaching high school, and it wasn't something I was prepared for, because in college you expect students to listen and be motivated, and not in high school. And the schools I ended up teaching in were actually very high need schools. I actually started here in the Bay Area. I started at Eastside Union, you may have heard, in San Jose. And then we moved to the South Bronx. So that was a very tough population, and I encountered students who were severely underprepared for school. They were not the least bit motivated. They were disengaged, disconnected, and it was a struggle for me every day to say, I can't just go in and say, let's talk about Shakespeare. These kids were not interested. It had nothing to do with their lives. So it was like a trial and error process, struggling every day. How am I going to get these kids to learn? How am I going to get them to listen? And as I was trying to find ways to connect, I thought, why don't I just make it personal? Because these kids have this intense personal vibe. They don't do academics that well. So I said, let's start by sharing my story. And I said, okay, I'm going to tell you guys about my life. These are the challenges I've faced. These are the ups and downs that I've gone through. And it was amazing what happened.
So since you shared your story, they opened up to you.
Absolutely. They suddenly just connected. It was overnight. They opened up. And not only did they connect with me, and we had this bond now where I could teach, they wanted to share their stories. And so it was like this door opened, and they had all this stuff to say because their lives, and we were talking about at-risk students, and they are at risk for academic failure because not through any fault of their own, but because of, first of all, poverty. I mean, poverty is the number one thing that causes kids to be at risk. And if you look at the statistics now, it's been going up rapidly. It's unfortunate that since 2007, it's gone up by about 3 million students are now under the age of 18 who are in high poverty in the United States in 2012.
That is shocking.
It's really hard to believe.
Right.
And so all these what happens with poverty, it boils over into every area of your life. So children who are experiencing poverty deal with homelessness, they deal with lack of medical care, they deal with lack of resources at the schools they're in, they deal with violence and gangs and the unsafe neighborhoods. So it's hard to expect those students to come into a school and start being academic.
Right.
So because of that, I thought let's share each other's stories. And as the floodgates opened, they wanted to talk about what they were doing. And so I said, I was thinking, okay, this is great. They're talking. They like me. I like them. But how do we make this into an academic thing? And it seemed, because I'm an English teacher, I thought, why don't I switch this to combine academic and personal? And that's where the idea of let's make personal narrative the way to teach began. And it was in the Bronx that I first started it. So I said, okay, let's write your stories. And they started writing, and as they're writing, because it's their story, and this is what I feel like, if you make learning relevant and not make it something, we tend to in schools say, leave the real life at the door.
Right.
We're in school now. We talk about school stuff. Whereas if you say, okay, bring the real stuff in and we'll show you how school can help you with that real stuff, children respond. So they started automatically wanting to proofread their work, wanting to use big words, wanting to use descriptive words because they wanted people to know. And so it was wonderful, it was successful, but it didn't occur to me at the time to do a book project. I had them write the stories, everything was great. And then we ended up moving back to California. So we moved to East Palo Alto. Actually, we moved to San Jose, but I was teaching. Stanford University has a charter school in East Palo Alto, you may have heard of. And so they invited me to come because here I had taught in the Bronx, so I must know what I'm doing. Little did they know I was just struggling. But they said, can you come and be a literacy coach for us? So I went in and I was dealing with, they gave me a group of students who were, even in that charter school where there were Stanford trained teachers trying to help at-risk kids, they couldn't deal with this particular group of students. So they said, why don't you work with them? You've been in the South Bronx, you must know what to do. So I started working with, it was truly, they were the toughest group of students I've ever encountered. Not because they had behavior problems, they didn't curse, they didn't, like the kids in the Bronx, nothing. They just sat there. And it was the most devastating thing, Manjula, to walk into a classroom and see a group of students, young people, just with no life in their eyes. Just staring like statues.
Because they have been made to feel that they don't matter.
Absolutely.
They have been labeled underachievers, so they have no motivation.
You're so right. I mean, that's the biggest thing, that kids get labeled as failures. And then they have to live up to that label, and they see no point in doing anything to fix it. So, and not only that, these particular children, if you know, East Palo Alto was called the murder capital of the country at one time in the 90s. And it's still really a hotbed of violence and drugs and gangs. So they see a lot of youth-on-youth violence. So they've sort of become immune to anything. They just are there. Frankly, when you hear some of the stories they write, you wonder how they make it to school.
I'm sure you have come across hundreds, if not thousands, of stories of these children. What was the most shocking or gut-wrenching thing that you discovered, or what shocked you the most in these stories?
It's sad to say that there's never okay, this is the worst one. Because in the beginning I thought, oh, this has to be the worst possible thing that could happen to a young child in America. And then you go to the next anthology and there's something worse, and there's something worse. So I found that with each progressive anthology, I'm finding even more heart-wrenching stories. I'll give you some examples.
Yeah, do give us some examples.
And I'll start with the very first one, because like I was saying, in East Palo Alto, I got them to write, and at that point I thought, let's get them published. This is the chance, because these kids needed more motivation than to just say, let's write. They didn't care. And I said, I will get you published. And I had no clue how I was going to do it. I just said it because I saw them smiling for the first time and responding. So they said, okay, all right. Then they started writing, and they wrote nonstop. I mean, if you see this,
they had a need to express themselves.
Kids who would never respond and speak in class were writing in class, out of class, during lunch, saying, can I please cut my other classes?
It's like therapy.
It was therapy.
Process.
Absolutely. It's cathartic. So they were writing, and then I said, okay, I have to find a publisher quick. So I was calling one person after another until someone finally agreed and said, okay, we will publish your book. Only one condition. You have to publish, or you have to sell at least 10 of these books each before I can cover the cost. So this started the next phase without us even realizing. Like I said, it was unplanned, but it became this movement. So the second part of Literate Voices is to get the kids doing marketing. So they write their books, they edit, they look up the sources, they find good words, they do adjectives, descriptive writing. Then they have to persuade people to buy. So marketing begins.
So it's a complete process.
Absolutely.
These are the kids who had no interest in reading or writing. Now they are taking pride in it because it's their work. And they're learning these skills also.
The skills along the way, relevant life skills, right? So now they have to go before school boards and school districts and go before the media and do interviews and say, buy our book, this is our story. So they became these young entrepreneurs because they know all of the profits go to the students from the books. So they sell the book, they keep the profits.
Great. How many books have you published so far?
It's been 4 so far. The 5th one is coming out next month. And we're doing the 6th one in the summer. So, yeah, to get back to the heart-wrenching story, the one to me that stands out is the very first one. If you see the title, it's Dreams Are for Others.
Oh, that itself is so touching.
It's so sad. It was because of one of the students, Jose, who told me, there's a dreams chapter. We start with name, neighborhood, family, and it expands from the self to the world and their place in the world. So when I got to the dreams, I said, Jose, write the dreams chapter. And he said, Miss, dreams are for other people, miss.
Wow.
And it was so sad. And I said, why do you say that? He said, people in East Palo Alto don't have dreams. I'm happy if I don't get shot on the way to school.
That is poignant.
Happy. It's horrifying. And I'm happy if I can live. And if I ask them, tell me what you want to be in 5 years. Every single essay would start, if I'm alive in 5 years. To me, that's heart-wrenching.
That is unbelievable.
That children can feel that way, that there are people existing in this country, children who can think that they don't have the right to have dreams and that they may or may not be alive in 5 years. So to me that, and I wasn't going to read stories for you, but just to give you an overview, they deal with poverty, with violence, with abuse, with having parents in jail, with having just no hope in their lives. So I mean, there's one example I can give you, Kesha, from the latest anthology, who writes that they had to live without heat for 1 year and that they would cook outside in the winter. So there are real desperate people out there right now in the country.
So the common thread that runs through these stories is poverty?
Yes, poverty and hardship. But what makes me happy is that as they do this project, as they start with that hopelessness, they name their hopelessness, and as they start writing and reading and thinking, they start to become more hopeful. So by the end of it, the dreams chapter is at the end for a purpose, for a reason, after I heard Jose. So by the end, they say, I have a dream. I'm going to go to this school. I'm going to go to Berkeley. I'm going to get a scholarship. I'm going to do this. And so the project is actually helping them to have that hope again.
Obviously, it's a very successful project. And if I remember it correctly, Governor Schwarzenegger commended your efforts, and you got contacted by Anderson Cooper's producers also.
I did.
So congratulations on that.
You.
So, do tell us a little bit more about the impact. How has this whole thing helped the children? What kind of an impact has it had on them? And how has it transformed their lives?
Okay, and it's really very gratifying to see the impact, because these are kids, and I've had teachers, because I'm no longer the teacher in the classroom, so I don't get to see a daily difference. But I am working now with teachers. So when I started the project, after I finally got the professor job, I found, ironically, that I was missing the kids. So I wanted to get back involved with the students. So after the East Palo Alto thing, I got the job as a professor. Then I moved to New York. Then I moved back here to Fresno State. And so in the Central Valley, I thought, I have to get back with the kids somehow. And so I got a little research stipend in 2010. I went into different schools that were continuation schools, schools that the kids had been expelled from every other high school in the district, and it's their last chance. So there are pregnant kids, there are children with babies already from 2 different fathers, there are children who are on parole, gang members, and so they were not responding to anything. We started this project, absenteeism was gone. Every single student was there every single day, and these are kids who come once a week normally. The teachers would come and say, this kid has never spoken before in this classroom. This is the first time in the year he opened his mouth. It's because we would have discussions about their relevant lives. What is it like to be poor? Why is poverty a cycle? What can you do to change
you touched a chord with them.
And I don't think it's something that only I can do. I feel like
anybody can do it. In fact, all schools should adopt this model.
Absolutely.
Because this is really working, and it's not very difficult to even implement.
It isn't, and it doesn't really cost anything either. You don't have to, because I was doing it in the Bronx. Now it's a one-woman operation. I mean, I sort of go into the schools and I talk to the schools. They pay for the publishing and the printing part now, and then all the profits go to the kids. So it's just like a and then the school gets the, the impetus for the other kids who see their seniors and juniors doing this, that the other kids want to do it. And the ending project is what we do at the end, and you were talking about Governor Schwarzenegger, we actually do a book launch. So after all this marketing, they have this huge book launch. The first one, 500 people attended. We had it at Fresno State. The students felt like celebrities.
Right.
And these were kids who were labeled failures. So they are sitting on stage. The governor sends a representative with a letter commending them on their activity. There's a media there, the Fresno Bee, all the reporters. They're being interviewed. And then they had a book signing. So they sat there like little authors and signed books for people who bought the books, gave them the money, and took the signed copies. So the impact is hard to measure. There are measurable impacts like test scores. We were actually able to do pre and post test scores and saw that there's a significant rise in test scores. So it's not that you just have to teach to the test. You can actually do wonderful projects like this and still gain academic skills. But the biggest impact, I think, and I think one that's more important, is that these students have a sense of self-confidence. Like you were saying, they're now feeling
their self-esteem, and they matter, and they feel important, and signing books,
Yeah.
and they feel like stars.
And that kind of, when you have success in one aspect of your life,
Yeah.
it tends to spread. You tend to feel like you can do things.
Then you get rolling.
And so there's a lot of those kids who they thought were going to work in a gas station next year are now going to the College of the Sequoias. They're going to community college. They're using some of the profits from the books to fund their education. And so the biggest impact for me, and maybe this is irrelevant, but one of the teachers came back and told me on the way back from the book launch, there are rival gang members in these classes, and they will kill each other outside the classroom. And they were on the way back, and she said, I was driving with Tina, and they were talking, and I heard them say, yo, you know, I would never even talk to you if we didn't do this project. And to me, that's the most beautiful achievement.
So they're bonding, whether they belong to different gangs or whatever, but they found a common platform here to work with. So, okay, now also it's your passion to take this project nationwide and even worldwide. So how do you plan on going about it?
Well, starting with you, Manjula, you're a great platform to talk about it.
Thank you. I'll do my bit.
Thank you. But what I've been doing, well, I'm a professor of education. So that way I have that platform with my students. They're all credentialed students who are going to be teachers. So I try to instill in them the sense that students have funds of knowledge. They come in with knowledge. You don't act like they're a blank slate. You honor what they know, and then they will honor what you have to teach them. So I do that, but I also travel across the country. I go to different universities. I was in Montreal at McGill University. I went to Trinidad and Tobago and spoke there at the University of the West Indies. I spoke in India at the English conference. And you'll find that worldwide, you think, okay, maybe it's just here. Maybe it's it's
this
everywhere.
Makes sense everywhere.
It's everywhere.
I believe you have a project in India also. Can you quickly tell us about that?
This is very exciting for me. It's our first international project, and of course my little Indian children are close to my heart. So I actually work with an ashram in India. It's the Hariharananda Ashram. It's in Orissa, and they started a residential school for orphans. And these orphans are orphans as a result of the cyclone that happened in Orissa a few years ago. So these children live in the ashram, they get free education, free uniforms, free food, everything. And so by 5th grade, I went last year to give them a literacy institute for the teachers to teach them how to do this. But I also thought, why don't we do a book project with the kids? And they responded immediately. Their little hearts, I mean, they were writing as I was still there, writing and writing and writing and telling me their stories about the devastation that they've experienced. And so we have a book ready to go, and this summer my exciting project is to edit that book and get it published for them.
What are the titles of all the books so far?
The first one, as I said, was Dreams Are for Others. And then we did one in Visalia at the continuation school, and it was called Against the Odds. And they come up with the titles. They say, we work against the odds, miss. We got this book done, so we'll name it. And it's called Visalia Voices. Then we did one in Sanger called Beyond the Fields. It's a rural community, and they wanted to say, even though when you drive by on 99, you just see a bunch of fields. There's people beyond those fields, and we have feelings too, and we have stories. So it was called Beyond the Fields. Then this one is, this is the most recent one. It's called Among the Groves. It's a community of orange trees and farmers and people who pick oranges. So they said, among those groves, we exist, we live here. And the latest one that's going to be coming out next month is called Niños de Oro. It's the Children of Gold, and it's from Cutler Orosi, and it's the first one that's actually going to have a Spanish translation. Because many of the parents want to read what their children are writing.
And where can people buy these?
They're available on our Facebook page. It's Literate Voices, and the books are available right on the page, so you can click and buy.
Now we talked about the impact on children, but also tell me, how has it made a difference in their peers? You know, what impact has it had on the community as a whole, the parents, the teachers, the other students? What have they gained from it?
I think they've gained a valuable lesson, first of all, and I mean, I hate to say it, but sometimes teachers need to be given lessons as well as their students. And I think for a lot of teachers, they tend to label these kids and tend to say, I don't want to teach those kids because they don't want to learn. And the fact is, one thing I've learned, Manjula, teaching in all of these high needs schools is that every student, I don't care how tough or thug-like or gangsterish they are or how they push back, they not only can learn, they are desperate to learn. This is a secret I found out. Nowhere have I found a kid who doesn't want to.
Otherwise, you just dismiss them, saying that they don't want to learn.
They want to learn.
That's not true.
Yeah, they absolutely want to. It's our job to find a way to hook them in and to teach them what they want to know and what they need to know.
So were some parents also shocked to hear some of the stories that they didn't know? that their child was feeling this way or going through something like this?
In fact, they've had sessions where the child has gone home and read the stories to the parents, and for the first time there's been healing within the family itself, because there have been stories of neglect and abuse and how they felt like, you know, their mom or dad didn't care for them, or they were in jail or whatever. And they've had these huge discussions, and the families have bonded over these books. Teachers have come up to me and said, teachers who weren't teaching these kids have said, wow, you know, you've opened my eyes. I really didn't realize these kids had it in them to do this. And the proof is right there in the pages. Their stories are amazing. I mean, I wanted to show you some examples of writing, if I can do a quick one.
Okay, sure.
I wanted to show you how, even though these are stories about their lives and, you know, it seems like a personal exercise, it actually, they tend to bring in the stuff we're teaching them about English. So, let me get it for you. So in English class, we teach similes and metaphors and all those things. So he's writing about a gang fight in Lindsay. He says, there were a lot of cops and people screaming, and it felt like the whole world stopped around them just to watch. All of a sudden, I saw a man fall to the ground, stabbed in his chest. He was twitching like a fish out of water, and there was blood pouring out of him, like a fountain in the summer when it's really hot. Everyone started running, and the cops were looking for the killer. I was running too. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get out of there and fast. But, I mean, it's a terrible incident, and that they see this kind of violence so early. But if you notice, as an English teacher, I know that I've been successful when they're using similes and metaphors, like a fountain gushing in the summer, bullets like firecrackers in the middle of the night.
So before we go, as an expert who has spent years with these children, teaching them, working with them, what is your advice or message for at-risk children and for other kids around and their teachers, parents, and the community?
Well, I have so much to say, it'll be hard to sum it up.
Okay.
But I think what I want to say to at-risk children especially is that that every person's voice counts. That no matter what circumstance, no matter what situation, what socioeconomic status you may be, that you never should feel that your voice is not valued. That you should feel that your voice is important and it needs to be shared, and you will, if you open up, find a way to get to where you need to go. You have to express what you want in order to get it. And for parents in general, and I'm not going to say that students at risk are only those who are poor. I think any student who's not engaged in school and doesn't feel like their voice is heard is at risk. So you could be the richest kid in town. If you don't feel engaged with school, you're still at risk for failure. And so for parents in general, my advice would be engage them in critical thinking. Help students to see beneath the surface. Help them to have a voice and to question. And I tell my teachers all the time, the shortest, the quickest route to helping someone become critically literate is to allow them to ask questions. So if your kids come up to you and say, why do we have to do this? It's annoying as a parent, I know. But to take the time and say, this is why. This is why we're doing it. Not
very good
do
advice.
it because I told you so. But here's exactly why. And when you treat people with respect, even if they're children, they understand and they say, okay, I see now why we're doing it.
Okay, wonderful. Jyothi, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant idea, and I wish you success with taking it nationwide and worldwide.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was Dr. Jyothi Bathina, founder and director of Literate Voices, a project which is having amazing success changing the lives of struggling and at-risk students by helping them find a voice and by giving them a platform to express themselves while turning them into published authors. For more information, go to literatevoices.com. And now for the next segment of our show, where we feature artists who are giving back. Today we'll present a piece by Ramesh Maraj, who is a professional saxophonist and band director with 3 CDs to his name. And he also happens to be Jyothi's husband. Having completed Masters of Education in New York, where he taught music and special education in Harlem schools, Ramesh has a special place in his heart for at-risk youth. Between touring nationally and internationally for concerts and private events, he performs regularly for charity events, and later this year he'll be giving a benefit concert for Literate Voices as well. all for joining us. To watch this show again, go to chaivithmanjula.org or YouTube. I'll be back with another inspiring story about giving and people making a difference. For Chai with Manjula, I'm Manjula Gupta. See you next time.